America. They don't hate Americans. As one Egyptian told me, I don't hate Americans, I hate your government. I hate your government because your government has exported terrorism and war all over this world. Your government is disenfranchising governments and people all over this world. And in their mind's eye, to have a person of color at the helm of this government might make a difference. It might make a difference, okay? And that's one of the reasons why when Barack was in Berlin in July, over 200,000 people came out to support this African man. 200,000 people. Now, you know, Berlin is a nation that doesn't have a whole lot of love for black folk. But those folk in Germany are hurting financially because of what is happening in this country. And how this country's manipulation of wealth is affecting people's pocketbooks all over the world. And so the people who don't live here know that America will be better off, that the world will be better off with someone else at the helm. And that someone that they're looking for is Barack. That someone that they're hoping for is Barack. George W. Bush has run this country in the ground. Both of them. But this son, the latest one, is done far worse than any other president in history. He will go down in history as the worst president of the United States in the history of this nation. He is the worst. He has manipulated the government. He has manipulated your pocketbook, my pocketbook. He has created wars based on lies and cost the lives of thousands of American citizens, but hundreds of thousands of foreigners all throughout the world. He is the worst. And when he was re-elected president the second time, or re-selected president, I stand corrected. When the election was stolen the second time, I remember the front page of a newspaper in London, England, asked the question, the headline read, "How stupid are Americans to have allowed him to steal the election twice?" And we did nothing. We didn't protest. We didn't demonstrate. We just said, oh, well, that's the elected process, and we went on with our business. And he went on with his business, which was the continued destruction of this nation and by extension, the rest of the world. And so others that I've encountered throughout this country know what we need to begin to understand on a very basic and fundamental level, that Barack is America's last chance to redeem itself. If they don't get it right this time, we can kiss it all goodbye. So let's look at point number 2. Does Barack really care about black people? And I want to look at some of the critiques, some of the critics of Barack. At the 3-week lecture series that ANewBlackMind held at Sankofa, when he saw that there was so much overwhelming, not hatred, but distrust for Barack, Brother Ackman stood up and just asked one simple question of the audience. How many of you all have read his book? And of the 50 or 60 people in the audience, maybe 2 read his book. So he asked the question, how can you critique him? If you haven't read his book, you can't critique him based on what you've seen on television or what you read in the newspaper. Have you read his own words? Do you know how he thinks? And if you haven't done that, then you need to shut up. Plain and simple. So, Ackman's declaration made me read his book because I hadn't read it. And because he's a man who I respect, who I love, who I appreciate, I decided to read the book. And as I've read the book, I've come to understand his first book, Dreams from My Father. When I read this book, I came to understand that Barack Obama is blacker than most black folk that I know, including a whole lot of folk who consider themselves to be African-centered. I'm telling you the honest God truth, based on my reading of his book. His book is a soulful telling of a black man in search for his father, in search for his identity. And as he talked about this search, I can relate to it. Because I spent my life as a black man searching for my father. I don't know who my father was. Never met him. I spent my life searching for my identity as a black man in the world. And so I can identify with his quest, the basic quest that every person has. Who am I? Where did I come from? And what is it in me that drives me to do the things you do? If you're lucky and have two parents, then part of that question can be answered. Because you can look at your parents and see yourself in them, their speech, their walk, their talk. But if you're separated from one of your parents, then 50% of you will never know. And you don't know how deeply that bothers someone until you're missing that 50%. So his book deals with that. He talks about the fact that he was raised by a white mother from Kansas who introduced him to black literature. Talking about the fact when he was a child, his mother was the one who introduced him to the works of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, James Baldwin. Because she knew that as a black man living in America, or white man's world, he would need to know who he was. She didn't raise him to be a colored guy or a black white person. She knew that he was going to be a black man. And so she prepared him to deal with life as best she could as a black man. So you remember in his presidential acceptance speech, he talked about the fact that his mother woke him up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do his homework because she wanted to prepare him for a world that was going to be anti-black male. How many mothers do you all know check their children's homework, let alone wake them up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do it? So let's get serious. Let's be honest with ourselves as we assess this man. He talked about the fact that after his mother remarried and he was in high school, he decided to come back to Hawaii to stay with his grandparents so that he could go to school in Hawaii. And as he talked about this relationship with his grandfather, who was more like a father to him, and if you read the story about his grandfather and his grandfather's relationship with his grandfather's life was kind of similar to the life of most black men I knew. He was struggling to make ends meet. He was struggling living in a household where the female in the household was making more money than he was. He was frustrated with life. Had high hopes, but was never able to achieve his high hopes. He talked about when they were living in Hawaii, he would always go down with his grandfather every night to a local bar. His grandfather would have a drink. And it just so happens, based on his description, the bar was in the black part of Hawaii. It was a black bar. Everybody in the bar was black. They knew him on a first name basis, and he hung out with black folk. So while Granddad was sitting down, drinking his beer, talking with the brothers, Barack was sitting down at the bar, drinking his Coke, talking with other folk in the bar. So he grew up around us. He knows our issues. And he's very clear about who he is. And then after college, after he graduated from Columbia, he moved to Chicago, my hometown. Moved to Chicago. And specifically, he got a job as a community organizer working in Altgeld Gardens. Now, I grew up on the west side of Chicago. Altgeld Gardens is on the far south side of Chicago. I didn't go to Altgeld Gardens, all right? I didn't go to Altgeld Gardens because as a black man living in Chicago, you knew that there were certain places you don't go because white folk would beat you up and your own folk would beat you up if you're from the wrong neighborhood. So he worked in Altgeld Gardens. So I can respect him going back into the community to work with our folk. He could have got a decent job working on Wall Street here in New York, or working in downtown Chicago or DC or Philadelphia, but he chose to work with his own people. So we have to acknowledge that. And in the book, he talks about his relationships with people in Chicago. He talks about the various communities that he lived in and worked in Chicago. So I can relate to this book again on many different levels because he was talking about my city. He was talking about people that I knew, that I grew up with. And there's a passage in the book where he talks about meeting this brother, this older brother, who was training young men or preparing young men for high school. I want to read you this passage, a couple of passages from this section of the book, because it describes his understanding of what black children, specifically male children, have to go through in this country. He met this brother, he was introduced to this brother named Asante, who was a counselor for young men. He said that we followed Dr. King's directions to a small office toward the rear of the building. It was decorated with African themes, a map of the continent, posters of ancient African kings and queens, a collection of drums and boards, and a kente cloth wall hanging. Behind the desk sat a tall, imposing man with a handlebar mustache and a prominent jaw. He was dressed in an African print, an elephant hair bracelet around the thick wrist. He seemed a bit put off at first, and he had a stack of SAT papers. So let me go on. He said the first thing, and so he was talking to Barack and his assistant about the work that they were doing as community organizers and the people that they were interacting with. So I want you to listen to this statement from Brother Asante here. The first thing you have to realize, he said, looking at Johnny and me in turn, is that the public school system is not about educating black children. Never has been. Inner city schools are about social control, period. They operate as holding pens, miniature jails, really. It's only when black children start breaking out of their pens and bothering white people that society even pays attention to the issue of whether or not these children are being educated. Just think about what a real education for these children would involve. It would start by giving a child an understanding of himself, his world, his culture, his community. That's the starting point of any educational process. That is what makes a child hungry to learn. The promise of being part of something, of mastering his environment. For the black child, everything is turned upside down. From day one, what is he learning about? Someone else's history, someone else's culture. Not only that, this culture he's supposed to learn is the same culture that has systematically rejected him and denied his humanity. Right, now that's a foundation, that's a discourse on education, a basic understanding of education. And then he talks about the fact that he chooses to expose these children to African history, African geography, artistic traditions. I try to give them a different values orientation, something to counteract the materialism and individual